What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? As always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Brettel. I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out every Monday and Friday over at Cheesehead TV. And you can find me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. That's BRETL. Week one is right around the corner. We are now just a few days away. And I did this a lot last year and even the year before, but I have several preview articles over at Dairyland Express that come out each week. One of them is the 5 big questions that I have facing the Green Bay Packers that week. Another one is XFactors for that game. So I thought that I would discuss each of those articles. The 5 big questions came out on Wednesday over at Dairyland Express. The XFactors came out Thursday over at Dairyland Express as well. And the reason I'm doing them together is because there is some overlap, because obviously the 5 big questions are 5 of the big things that I'll have my eyes on this week. And when it comes to determining X factors, I know that that can be a subjective term, but for me, an X factor is the person who can have an impact on those key areas within the game. So I thought that those two went together well. So I decided to combine these articles within this video here for you. So let's dive into my 5 big questions. The first one is, how is playing in Jacksonville going to affect this game? Not just for the Green Bay Packers, but for the New Orleans Saints. So there's 2 key factors within this. One is that it's not in front of the New Orleans home crowd. We all know within that dome how much of a home field advantage that truly is for the New Orleans Saints. So in that regard, it absolutely benefits the Packers that they're going to be in Jacksonville, where there's the very real possibility that there's going to be more Packers fans there than Saints. It could sound like a home game for the Green Bay Packers. It's obviously a benefit for them. However, it's in Jacksonville, and right now the temperature is expected to be 86 degrees with a very thick 73% humidity. Now, summer up here in Green Bay, it's very hot, it's very humid. So in that regard, the Packers have been practicing in, I won't say it's the same as Florida heat or Florida humidity, but somewhat similar conditions. You know, it's not as if it's been December where it's 20 degrees up here and then they're going down. They're at least somewhat acclimated to the heat at this point, but still that heat down in Florida is absolutely different, hits different than it does up here in Green Bay. Hydration is going to be key. Matt LaFleur's talked about it all week. So how does that affect this Green Bay Packers team? The New Orleans Saints, who have had training camp in Louisiana, obviously they are going to be much more accustomed to this than what the Packers are. If I'm having to choose which I think plays the bigger factor, I think it is the lack of New Orleans Saints fans that end up being a bigger factor for the Green Bay Packers than the detractor, the subtraction of having to play in that kind of heat versus in a dome. But all in all, this is something to keep our eyes on with this game and how it potentially affects any outcome or anything like that. My second big question: can this Green Bay Packers offensive line hold up against the Saints defensive front? So Elton Jenkins is going to be a left tackle, and on my part, there's really not a lot of concern, and I feel like a lot of people feel that way. But it's worth noting at least that he only has 29 career snaps at left tackle in the NFL. He's held up very well during training camp, especially in one-on-ones against the Green Bay Packers pass rushers, which we all know, Preston Smith, Rashawn Gary, they have very good pass rushers. But still, this is different. The other big factor, more important factor along this offensive line is that there are 2 rookies starting. Josh Myers is going to be at center. Royce Newman is going to be at right guard. How do they hold up? Matt LaFleur said it well. There's going to be growing pains. There absolutely is. We may not see the same continuity early on in the season along that Green Bay Packers offensive line as we're accustomed to, because usually this is a very veteran group that the Green Bay Packers put out on the field. So there are going to be mistakes. We need to be prepared for that. But this is a Green Bay Packers team with Super Bowl aspirations. This is a Green Bay Packers team that is expected to be very good this season. As Aaron Rodgers said, these rookies have to play like veterans, and ultimately that's what it comes down to. Yes, they're rookies. Yes, this is their very first NFL game. Yes, they're going up against a very good Saints defensive front. But where this team is, where they want to go, the Royce Newman, Josh Myers, they have to play well. And it's going to be a tough test for them. as a whole, this Green Bay Packers offensive line is going to be up against Cam Jordan, the edge rusher. This is a very deep edge rusher unit that the Saints have. And all in all, it's pretty much the same group along that defensive front that they had last year. Last year, the Saints defense allowed only 93 rushing yards per game. That was the third fewest in football. They also totaled 45 sacks, which was the fourth fewest. So for this whole Green Bay Packers offensive line unit, it's going to be a tough test. But those rookies in particular, in your first NFL action, fortunately, it's not in the dome, but it is going to be on the road. So it's going to be a tough test for them as well. How do they hold up? Next, big question number 3. Can the Green Bay Packers contain Alvin Kamara? Really, there's no stopping Alvin Kamara. He is going to rip off a big play, maybe even 2 of them. He's going to end up putting up a decent amount of yardage. That's just how it is. We need to accept that right now. But the goal should be that Alvin Kamara, like I said, they contain him and he does not take this game over. If you recall during last year's game, it's pretty much what he did. He had 195 total yards from scrimmage, including 139 as a pass catcher, targeted 14 times, catching 13 of those targets for 2 touchdowns. And if you recall, there was the 52-yard run where I think he broke 5 tackles on that play. It was just an abysmal performance, not just on that play, but overall by the Green Bay Packers defense in the tackling department. It's going to be crucial that they find a way to contain Kamara because he is, with Michael Thomas out, their one true weapon on this offense. And if they can limit what he does, it's going to make things a lot more difficult for Jameis Winston. This Green Bay Packers defense this year under Joe Barry, I'm hoping that we see more playmaking ability from the linebacker position. I know I've talked about that on here before, but we're going to see a lot more consistent 5-man defensive fronts, which should allow those linebackers to be freed up. It's also going to be important for the safeties. They are going to be playing closer to the line of scrimmage. They are going to have to be factors against the run. And in that 2 high safety look that we're going to see from Joe Barry, that provides the cornerbacks with some help and coverage. But in those open field plays in the flat where Kamara is going to be getting the ball, it's going to require them to make some one-on-one tackles. So there's really not one player that this falls on. It's going to be up to this entire defensive unit. Kamara has the ball. They're going to need to swarm to it. They're going to need to wrap up. They are going to need to make sure that their tackling is sound. And in week 1, when there's just not a lot of tackling taking place during the preseason, during training camp, for a lot of these players who sit out during the preseason games, they're going to need to be very sound week 1. But again, because there's just not the same full contact practices that there used to be, we have seen tackling slip over the years. But they're going to need to contain Alvin Kamara. My 4th big question for the Green Bay Packers is, are we going to still see the same turnover-prone Jameis Winston that we saw in Tampa Bay? Winston, in his last season as a starter in 2019, put up some monster numbers, over 5,100 passing yards, which led the NFL. He had 33 touchdowns as well, but he led the NFL in another category, interceptions, with 30 of them. 30. In the previous 4 seasons with Tampa, he threw 55 interceptions during that span, and he even missed 8 games as well. Interceptions, in that regard, we know that interceptions, to some degree, are always going to be a part of Jameis Winston's career. However, having a year in New Orleans with Sean Payton as your head coach, being able to learn behind Drew Brees, are we going to see a toned-down version of that? And I think that's a valid question in all of this. Has that year of learning from a future Hall of Famer, a coach like Sean Payton, has that helped curb some of that aggressiveness, that those accuracy issues that we've seen from him in the past, and will it lead to fewer turnovers? If it does, then obviously that creates more of a challenge for the Green Bay Packers. However, if Winston is still slinging it around, throwing 2 or 3 interceptions potentially each game, that could be the difference in whether this game is, a 3, 4, 5-point game or 13, 14, 15 if the Green Bay Packers are able to come away with 2 or 3 turnovers. So that is absolutely something worth keeping our eyes on. And for the Green Bay Packers to do that, or to help themselves come away with more turnovers, that leads me into my 5th question, which is, can the Green Bay Packers force consistent pressure on Jameis Winston against this New Orleans Saints offensive line? So going back to Jameis Winston, how that ties in, of course, if they're able to put pressure on him, that's going to lead to poor decisions. That's going to lead to more turnover opportunities. However, this Packers defensive front is going to be up against a solid New Orleans Saints offensive line. They have perhaps the best offensive tackle duo in football, or at least one of them, in Teron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk. They have Eric McCoy at center, Cesar Ruiz at guard. It's a very well put together offensive line unit. And as we know, the Green Bay Packers in 2020, they did not generate anywhere near the same pressures that they did in 2019. According to Pro Football Focus, for example, 2019, the Green Bay Packers in 2020, the Green Bay Packers had 251 pressures. That was way down from the 338 that they forced the year before. It's a big reason why we saw the Green Bay Packers force fewer turnovers last year, and why in general the defense just wasn't as strong of a performer as it was in 2019. Pressure is key. Pressure also in slowing the run game is going to help this defense as well. Putting Jameis Winston in more obvious passing down situations is going to be crucial and potentially lead to more of those turnovers. But it's not going to be easy. We don't know if Zadarius Smith is going to play. Kenny Clark, we're going to need to see him continue to play well. Preston Smith or Rashawn Gary, it's going to take, as always, it's going to be a group effort, but they're going to be up against a tough offensive line unit if they're going to accomplish that. If they can, again, that's a key factor within this game that could allow Green Bay to really take it over if they're able to consistently get after Jameis Winston. So those are my 5 big questions. And like I said, I now have 3 X factors, and they all really tie in to everything that I discussed. The first X factor, not a player, it's tackling. And again, it's because of Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is really the one player on this Saints offense that can just wreck this game for the Green Bay Packers. If he puts together a similar performance to what he did last year, it's going to allow New Orleans to keep this game relatively close. And who knows, in close games in the fourth quarter, really anything can happen at that point. But if the Green Bay Packers are able to slow Alvin Kamara down, it's going to make it moving the ball a lot more difficult for this New Orleans offense, especially without Michael Thomas, as I mentioned earlier. And to do that, they are going to have to tackle Alvin Kamara. It's not an easy task. They're definitely going to miss some, but they need to find a way to do it consistently. My second X factor, actually I have 2 of them. We talked about them already. It's Josh Myers and Royce Newman. The name of the game in football, especially in Green Bay, is keeping Aaron Rodgers upright. If the Green Bay Packers are able to give Aaron Rodgers time in the pocket, this is a Saints cornerback group. I know they have Marshawn Lattimore, but overall it's a very thin group. And Aaron Rodgers, with these receivers, these tight ends, these running backs out of the backfield, if he has time, he should be able to have a lot of success, and so should the receivers, the pass catchers, against the Saints secondary. But it's going to start with them getting time, or Rodgers getting time in the pocket, especially from his rookies in the interior. And as I mentioned, they are going up against a very good New Orleans Saints defensive front. On top of that, we've seen what happens to this Green Bay Packers offense. As good as they can be, as good as they are, when the running game struggles, they get all out of whack. Things slow down. We don't see them have nearly the same success. And go look back at the NFC Championship game at times. Go look back at Green Bay's first matchup with Tampa Bay during the regular season last year. I mean, those are prime examples of how this offense can start to sputter when the run game isn't working. So the rookies inside, it's going to be important for them to have success in their first NFL action. My last X factor, Preston Smith. Going with that last big question that I had, putting pressure on the quarterback, it's going to be crucial. If they can take away the run, as I mentioned, put Jameis in more obvious passing situations, that's good. If they can put pressure on Winston, likely lead to some bad decisions, also good news. We don't know if Zadarius Smith is going to play or not, but regardless of whether he does or if he doesn't, they're going to need Preston Smith to have a strong performance in what hopefully ends up becoming a bounce-back season. As we all know, it's well documented by now, he went from 62 pressures in 2019 to only 29 last year, from 15 sacks to only 5. It's going to be important that he finds success, and we could have thrown Rashawn Gary into this group as well. I think Gary is going to continue to ascend just as he did from year 1 to year 2. Well, I think we'll see that again in year 2 and year 3, from year 2 to year 3. But for Preston Smith, especially against this strong Saints offensive line. It's going to be important that he comes out of the gate swinging this year because the Green Bay Packers are going to need him to help against the run and to get after the quarterback. So those are my 5 big questions, my 3 X factors for this week's game. Friday over at Cheesehead TV, I'm going to be doing my final thoughts, just kind of a brain dump on everything going into this matchup with the New Orleans Saints. My hope is to put a video version of that out and a podcast version out on Saturday, the day before the game. So check it out there at Cheesehead TV. And as I said, these 2 articles, topics I discussed today, you can find over at Dairyland Express. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, hit like, rate, subscribe, review, anything and everything. I greatly appreciate it. That helps me out a lot. And until next time, friends, take care, stay safe, and as always, go Pack, go.